Good evening and welcome. Hi, welcome to the Scarborough Town Council Ordinance Committee meeting. It is October 8th. I want to note that we have a full committee here this evening with myself, Councillor Donovan, and Councillor Fellows. First on our agenda is we did our roll call, and next on our agenda, we have public comment. And public comment, I will explain right now. We'll take public comment before each agenda item. So if you're here to speak on a specific agenda item, I ask that you please wait for that agenda item. We'll introduce it and then you'll have a public comment. Right now, public comment is for if anyone has any comments they want to make on anything that's not on the agenda, any sort of ordinance recommendation or anything they wanted to point out, now would be the time. Okay, no comments there. So we'll move on to item 4, which is the approval of the minutes of our September meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Great, thank you. Okay, so we move on to item 5 on our agenda, which is to review and consider the creation of a new ordinance establishing a registration process for short-term rentals. And this evening, we have our town planner and our fire chief and deputy chief here.
Thank you, Councilor Shu. So at our last meeting, we talked about the registration process for short-term rentals. We did hear from fire chief and deputy fire chief about some safety concerns and making sure that we wanted to address putting those safety inspections back in the ordinance. So what's in your packet tonight is a redlined version of the previous short-term rental registration process with the inspection process put back in, and I can share my screen and we can 1 second. And so this first part, purpose, applicability, all of that remains the same. Definitions remain the same. In the registration application requirements, I did add the maximum planned occupancy that came up at our last discussion as well. And then I also changed this emergency contact from 60 minutes to 90 minutes. There was a request to be a little bit more accommodating on that, especially for the weekends. And then the parking requirement acknowledgement, and I included a statement that you needed to provide the number of off-street parking spaces provided for the short-term rental. So especially for those where you may be living on site as well. And so the 2 spaces that you have might be for your own dwelling. Maybe you only have 1 space. Just wanted to make sure that that was provided. And then we added this about a reference to the good neighbor rules, that those must be posted in all the rentals. The green text is just a note that the town, if this goes through, this would be a registration process through the town clerk, and we would have a placard that would give you your short-term rental registration, but we could also provide something that they could put in the rental discussing the good neighbor ordinance. And then for safety compliance, the safety requirements are still the same, but the inspection it's required would be a safety inspection, should be provided by the town within 45 days of the initial registration, and then once every 3 to 5 years to determine compliance with the short-term standards above. And then that you would need to redo that if you change ownership. And I did the green text again, is just for information that the thinking is we'd allow a grace period for this first initial registration process up to 12 months. And then short-term rental owners shall have 30 days to correct any safety compliance requirements described. So if the safety inspection found that we were missing a smoke alarm in a bedroom or something to that effect, they'd have 30 days to fix that. And I believe there's one other change I made. It was concerning for some of the short-term rental owners, I think, about code violations. So I added outstanding code violations. So that means if we have a pending case against you and we know that we're working on that, would come into play for your registration. So with that, myself and the chief and deputy chief are here to answer any questions or provide any more information you might have.
Do either of you have any questions for Autumn before we open it up to public comment? Yes.
Sorry, one quick question. Can you explain the rationale behind the 3 to 5 years? And is that intended to be, to just sort of give leeway for staff?
Yes, it's actually, it came up in a lot of the examples that we saw, and I think that was really I think that was to give the leeway because some of these properties might be very new and we can flag this one's all set, right? We can look at that one in some time. The 3 years, maybe we know this one was a little bit maybe in different situation. And so, but yeah, it was just a grace period. We could definitely shore it up, make it firm, but it also allowed for, there's, I think around 350 or so now. In 10 years there, that may triple and every 3 years might be hard to get on that schedule. So that was the thing.
Okay, thanks.
No, that was the one question I had. I assumed it was flexibility on the part of the fire department to do that so that, and if it's a newer unit, go to the back of the line because you're less likely. Thank you.
Great. Okay. If we don't have any other questions, what I'll do now is I will open it up to.
Can I just speak to that real quick?
Yeah,
What
absolutely.
we do with every building in town that we inspect, we use a hazard assessment profile. It's not just we pick a house and say, or a building and say, it's based on the assessment. And I think the age of the home, the conditions, the things like that, any other hazards around it is what we would really use. It wouldn't just be arbitrary.
Right. Yeah. I appreciate that. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to open up to public comment. I'm going to remind everyone, if you're new to this, that you have 3 minutes. I'll ask that you come up to the podium, direct your comments to me, the chair, and you have 3 minutes.
Averill Hill, Maple Avenue. First, I want to say that I fully support the current short-term registration draft. Thank you for your hard work. I know that a lot went into it, but I want to speak to zoning that I feel needs to be addressed and needs more work with this. A few years ago, I watched the zoning appeals meetings for a woman in my residential neighborhood who lives in an old farmhouse on Honeywell. She wanted to open a commercial vegetable stand at her house. Now, some may not know that no license or zoning approval is needed for setting up a little stand in front of your home to sell excess vegetables from your garden. But if a resident wants to turn it into a business, they need to apply for a zoning exemption. Abutters must be notified. Zoning requirements include that a home-based business in a residential district shall be clearly incidental and secondary to the use of the dwelling unit for residential purposes, and the traffic generated by such home occupation shall not increase the volume of traffic so as to create a traffic hazard or disturb the residential character of the immediate neighborhood. Those are direct quotes. Her request for her stand was denied due to traffic concerns and that it wouldn't be in line with the character of the neighborhood. How is it then that that entire houses purchased by offsite investors in these old historically residential neighborhoods, not at our beaches, can be turned into business ventures with the owners not even living in them, not have the same zoning ordinances apply to them? These houses, many with 4 or more bedrooms with ever-changing groups of people, their cars, vacation gatherings, and pets, disturb the residential character of the immediate neighborhood. Aligned with this is that our current zoning doesn't allow any type of lodging, including bed and breakfast, in the R2, 3, and 4 districts. Other Maine municipalities addressing zoning, along with their short-term registrations in both Portland and South Portland, either banned or restricted non-owner occupied short-term rentals in residential districts. So while the Ordinance Committee has put forth an excellent registration process for short-term rentals, this is distinct from, nor should it somehow override, our existing zoning. Put another way, when I register my car with the town, it doesn't mean I can park it anywhere I want. People with young children, working families, and retirees seeking peace who aren't living at the beach don't want or expect to live next to a bustling vacation homes open to the general public. And by the way, in a CNBC headline today, it stated that real estate investors, both individual and institutional, bought 1/3 of all single-family residential properties sold in the second quarter of 2025. High on the list of the town council's guiding principles that contributed to the new rate of growth ordinance is to protect the character of our existing neighborhoods. The town needs to uphold its own zoning, ordinances and promises to those of us who live here and consider our own private homes and quality of life our most important, cherished, and invaluable investment. Thank you.
Ellen Jennison. I'm with the Scott and Sunny Townsend team and HigginsBeachMaine.com. I realize this is a very arduous process and appreciate all of your time. I'd like to speak to the emergency contact. As a 15-year manager of vacation rentals and long-term rentals, I recognize that condition and operation of a property can be subject to many factors. And additionally, I'd like to mention that many of our owners live here part-time and live out of the state, out of the country in different time zones. So to contact them within 90 minutes of a complaint about perhaps a coffee pot that's not working at midnight, or maybe some sand on the floor at 2 a.m. seems a little bit ridiculous. And to expect them to have to respond to that in 90 minutes. So I'd like to suggest and request that this term be tightened up a little and maybe just relative to safety and perhaps actual operation, and not so much up for interpretation of the guest. If they're checking in at 6 p.m., 4 p.m., 2 p.m., they should have ample opportunity to realize the condition and basic operation of the property prior to a 2 o'clock in the morning phone call. So maybe we could limit that to 8 to 8, or something a little more reasonable, so that we're not all getting phone calls 1, 2, 3 in the morning. If it's a true emergency, and maybe that's designated fire, your pipes have burst, maybe that's a 911 call. And then because of the registration process, the police can then reach out to the property manager or the owner. So I'd just like to make that suggestion. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Allison Bailey. I'm with Bailey Vacation Rentals. Thank you again for being here together. I think this is great. I know there's been a lot of hard work in here as well. So a couple of suggestions that I have on the current proposed ordinance. The emergency contact, I will also reiterate on top of Ellen. I do think that the safety and integrity is super important for the well-being of the town. If we could focus more on just the safety piece, I think that would be great. As always, sometimes outside sources or neighbors can give calls, and that level of impact, I think, can be determined within business hours, and or with the manager, and or with the neighbor themselves. So I always encourage for anyone to call us directly so we can handle those situations, as far as maybe any excessive calls or noise or things like that. But again, for the emergency contact, I do think that would be important for the safety piece only. I do understand having to put a timeline on it. Again, I do believe that an hour-and-a-half timeline is more difficult for a professional manager, but the most important piece would be outlining for the safety piece. Another thing that I noticed here is there is a cost to be prepared for this registration process, but the cost isn't presented here on this ordinance draft. So I think that's really important to discuss what that might look like for anyone who's going to be registering. Another one here is we do have a start date effective as of January 2026. I know we've been doing this for 10 years. So sorry, 10 years, for a few years. And so I believe if something is moved forward, that it should be past January, so that way we can have more time to read the proposed ordinance, what has been agreed upon, and create a plan if any plan needs to be made. It is not enough ample time from right this date until already as of January, because that will be under less than 3 months. Another thing that I would like to notate here is a 30-day to fix items. Now, sometimes these item fixes could come from third parties. So I believe taking off a timeline, and that is each independent's responsibility. If they want to obtain this registration process, it will be their responsibility to bring this back to the town when these items have been completed. And as stated in here as well, that there is a 12-month grace period. So I think that can be put into calculation as well. But if someone chooses to move forward and they have to get a third party in, that should be up to the independent person to have that installation timeline, just again, because it's third party and sometimes, you know, you can't get a contractor in that time frame. So I would request adjustment on installment as well. And again, thank you guys. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Is there anyone online? No? Okay. Is there anyone else wishing to give public comment on the short-term rental ordinance? Okay. With that being said, I will close the public comment and then I will open it up to the council, the committee. I don't know if anyone wants to dive in first. I know that we had some feedback regarding the 3 to 5 year inspection. And so for me, hearing the explanation behind why you want that time frame, I guess in my mind makes sense because it kind of alleviates you of the pressure of every 3 years. And then also alleviates the residents of the pressure of every 3 years if they don't in fact need it. So while I think people wanted to narrow it down, I guess I appreciate, I can see why they wanted to have that time frame. And I feel like it does put a little bit pressure on the staff and then also we maybe are redundantly inspecting properties that don't need to be. So I mean, despite some of the feedback, I'm comfortable with the 3 to 5 years because it also lets residents know that within 3 years you can come, but also I think if, you know, their inspection is coming in and they're saying, you know, we don't need to be here for 5, I feel like that was again within their discretion to be like where they are. So I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
was just gonna offer, I wonder if, you know, this registration process would be annual. So when you come in to register and it gets distributed amongst staff, maybe at that point, so you would know, that's when perhaps fire could flag it for, oh, we're gonna do an inspection this year. When they do the initial registration, that might be a way to make it at least not arbitrary, like we're gonna get a call one day and
Right.
would that be helpful? I wonder if,
I don't know.
about it.
I think something like that could be helpful. I think, you know, for a lot of us who do this stuff and we're accustomed to looking at ordinances and hearing about the imperfections of ordinances, having ambiguity is a little bit of a red flag. So for me, I think it would be helpful to have some mechanism to provide a little bit of predictability, understanding that, and I think this applies across the board to a few other provisions in this ordinance, that it is something that's new. And as you pointed out, Autumn, there's a grace period here as well. And the chief and deputy, deputy chief have said before that this is going to be approached sort of in that spirit, that there's going to be a lot of education going on, and it's not really intended to be a gotcha type process. It's really about safety and education. So given all of that, I think I'm happy with where this is at this point, understanding that you know, there may be additional steps going forward depending on what sort of information we gather and on how we see this working in practice. Thanks.
Picking up on Corey's point, I think several people have mentioned that there's interpretation problems that can arise from the language of the draft. But I think the fire department, which will be called upon most often for public safety issues, they should realize that they have the discretion to be able to deal with the situation that's presented to them. And I think that allows solutions so that property owners with tenants are not going to be really disrupted by a circumstance that just arises. Because I think the fire department should exercise the necessary judgment as to how to deal with the situation.
Just if I could offer, I think as written, as proposed, the town really assumes the responsibility to schedule those inspections. So intentionally, it's not tied to the annual registration. And we have built that flexibility for our benefit, frankly. So I know it's not absolutely clear in the ordinance, but I think we do assume the responsibility for scheduling the initial inspection and then reaching out and scheduling subsequent inspections. It's not the responsibility of the property owner. They do have to get the registration annually. Whether we choose to do that through the annual process by flagging properties and making them aware at that time, that's something we haven't sorted through yet. But I think the town does assume that responsibility of scheduling those inspections.
Perfect. I think another one of the issues that came up was the emergency contact. So I just kind of wanted to discuss that maybe for a minute, because I do appreciate hearing from residents who are concerned about the 90-minute thing. And I think one of the conversations or things that I've been thinking about, though, is if anyone comes into Scarborough and it's not a short-term rental and they're staying overnight, they're in a building that has on-site management or someone that is there helping manage the property. And so I think, and to me, like that's what happens if you're renting, you need to have someone there accountable if there's a problem. And so when I read emergency contact, I don't think about, like Allison was saying, like little issues. I'm thinking like your house is on fire, we're standing in front of your home and it's burning down, type of emergency contact situation when it's that level. And this reads, that's how I read it, of like an emergency. And I think for me, the 90 minutes is also telling your neighbors that even though you're not home and there's someone renting there, that there is someone accountable that will be responding any time of the day, knowing that if there's an issue, that there is someone to contact. It doesn't need to be the owner. And I know that not everyone has managers, but I think that's part of the problem we're running into is we have a rental with no management company and you have an emergency and the fire and the police have no contact, no way to contact anyone. And so I think this sort of forces the hand of you have to have a contact, and it needs to be someone that is, they don't have to be local, but someone who can handle the situation when it's an emergency. But I do want to hear how you guys feel about that.
Yeah, I think the fact that we are inserting a necessary contact who can be reachable within a reasonable period of time is a very important. I've done a lot of rentals over the years, and this is a question that I always have. Can I be reached? Can I make sure that if something happens, that I can respond to it? So this is for the wellness, safety of the occupants. This is an important consideration. And it makes the owner of the property much more cognizant of what they need to do. Because I've lived this, I've seen it, where you go, oh yeah, I should have been more attentive to that.
Yeah, and like you, Karen, I read this as, it's billed as emergency contact. So to me, that pretty clearly conveys we're not talking about, the air conditioning doesn't turn up all the way or the coffee maker doesn't work, things like that. I think it's pretty clear within the context of this, what we're talking about here. It seems reasonable.
Yeah, this provision is for our, I'll say, convenience, but it may be necessity given the situation, really for those rare, and I would say very rare occasions where we're made aware of an issue. It could be an excessive noise complaint, which I think time does matter. Obviously, any other kind of emergency response may be even more acute. But this is for those occasions where through our dispatch center, we're made aware of a situation and it's not been resolved through other means. So they resort to us. So I would expect it's a very small percentage of time.
And I was hoping to get a little more clarification on 30 days to correct. So are they not getting their license until they have the correction in 30 days?
The way it's drafted is they would get the license or the registration. They would register and then they would get in the queue for an inspection. So that might be 45, 60 days. The first year, it might be a while, but then they would come and do their inspection and then.
Moving forward, yeah. So realist 30 days is what we get. That's our inspection program. We give that to every business, anybody else that's out there. It goes across the board. And to be honest with you, 30 days gives me a little bit of heartburn, but I can accept it because we're talking smoke detectors, small things that you can go up to Ace Hardware and buy. But it does match it. It's in line with our other inspection processes and, larger violations that John sees on a regular basis are corrected within 30 days that take several contractors and things like that. So I don't think, I think it's reasonable for 30 days for a person who owns one of those to get a smoke detector up, get a gas detector up, or correct some type of violation that is,
Okay.
I think that's reasonable.
And what's your plan? Are you gonna go back out there in 30 days? So then are we inconveniencing them with a second inspection, or how would you handle that?
Yeah, I think it would depend on what we'd come up with. I mean, if it's something minor and they can submit a photo to show that it's been corrected, that's what we do now with some of our inspections, our businesses. If it's a, for instance, in a business, an emergency light that's not working and they can press the button and show that it's working in a photo, I don't necessarily have to go back. If it's something, I guess you'll gauge it on what the severity is. I think the worst case scenario is if you get someplace and it's just or the inspector doesn't feel comfortable even leaving the property because, egress is blocked by storage, things like that. That would be something that would be more of an immediate correction on site before we can truly leave. But on the violations that are more easily fixed, then we offer the opportunity to submit some photos so we don't have to go back there again.
Right.
Because it is going to be a little bit of a lift, especially out of the gate.
Right, yeah. No, and I think that's good for residents to know that we're not trying to come back and reinspect. So if
It's
something
in line with,
like that-
we just recently did the cannabis licenses in August, so very similar. They're minor violations. They would send a photo. If it was something larger, then we would get eyes on it during a reinspection on site. But similar to every other type of license that we review, although this is obviously registration.
I would just note the other way to handle this is either not issue the license until satisfactory
Correct.
compliance or some revocation process. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about they're able to operate in the interim. And I think that's, proven itself to be certainly, it works in other contexts, and we think it will work just fine here.
So what if I have a violation that's beyond, I don't have a smoke detector and I can't get a contractor in 30 days to do that? I can't be the first person who's come across that problem.
Right, I think those would be a case by case basis, if we're doing an inspection, it's clearly a location that someone should not be sleeping in, in a basement next to the oil tank and the furnace, and there's, not proper egress windows, and it's really an unsafe situation, then that's obviously something where the manager just mentioned, we may be looking at a revocation or suspension until it can be truly reevaluated, and is that space, and that's our biggest concern, is that across the country, there are places being rented that are truly not made for someone to be sleeping at night, and nor are the responding first responders considering as they arrive that they're going to find someone sleeping in there. It's similar to responding to a business and you find someone sleeping in the back of the business. That's not something we're expecting on when we get there. So if we get into some place, and there were only egresses, the exterior stairs, and look like they're ready to fall off the building, then that's obviously something we'd have to take a less than 30-day approach on. And that'd be something where maybe code enforcement, we would discuss, how do we fix this? Is there something they can do in the interim to shore it up? And then find a contractor to truly make the necessary repairs to it. And again, I think those will really be isolated case by case, but I think for the most part, I would imagine that most of the violations we're going to find are more of a minor nature, and maybe it's more, again, the education piece. They just weren't aware, maybe where detectors needed to be placed, and we can correct that with them.
Yeah, just keep in mind, beyond this ordinance, we have other means, other codes that can,
Right.
they can placard a building and make certain that when he even sets foot across the threshold, if given the situation.
I will say, speaking to the emergency contact piece, that's also a tool for the owner, because if we are on their location and they're unaware that something's going on, unbeknownst to them, it would give us a tool. And I agree with what Councilor Fellows was saying. We're not talking about sand on the floor. I mean, if we're there and there's just something that we're like, the owner really probably should know about it. I know it's 4 a.m., but somebody needs to know what we're observing right now, or certainly first thing in the morning, then giving us that information, because there are oftentimes in respond to homes now that we don't have the ability to notify somebody, and we check all our records, and dispatch may get a hold of somebody and they were the owner 7 years ago and they don't know who the new owner is. And it's just, we're trying to do the right thing with some outreach to the owner, say, hey, there's something going on with your building, similar again to a business. And that's going to allow us to be able to contact the right person and at least make them aware of a situation that needs their attention as the owner.
And also in line with all of our other business inspections, we've also accepted that if somebody provides us, hey, we talked to this contractor, they told us they can't come for 30, 45 days. They have something in writing that says, we're going to get this done. We've accepted that in the past, said, okay, we understand there's a delay. So again, our inspection process is all about education. It's all about trying to make sure we are not looking to be in the enforcement mode, essentially. We're trying to make sure people are doing the right things voluntarily.
Do you guys have any other questions? I will say one of the feedbacks I got was I know that we wanted to put the good neighbor ordinance rules in there, and someone pointed out a good point that we have a lot of different dog rules in town. And one of the suggestions was that maybe we should also educate the renters coming in on what our dog rules are. And I don't know if that's something that can be included as well, or if not, but I just wanted to point out that I thought that was a good point, because I think that is an issue we're running into. I mean, people come from all over because we allow the dogs, but we do have rules about where they can be and things like that. So just think about it, but I just wanted to throw that out there as well, because I think that's probably a good education tool for people coming to town that aren't aware.
Well, you make a good point, because we are a beach community, and short-term rentals will involve vacationers, and people will come and want to visit the beach, frequently with dogs.
Yep.
So you make a good point.
Yep, that was not my point. I appreciate residents' feedback. With that being said, I am comfortable with the ordinance that we have in front of me. I don't know if we have a motion or if we have any more comments.
Well, before we make a motion, I did want to say that I was pleased with the way in which this is developed. The safety aspects, I think, really improve the short-term rental elements here. And I think the approach we're taking of studying the short-term rentals, where the registration process, I think, would agree, will give us tremendous insight into what is the extent and where are short-term rentals taking place. Because this is, to me, a start. I don't want to over-regulate, but I'd like to be able to have the information in the months and years ahead to make intelligent decisions about how to regulate it, because there are people in the community who thinks it undermines neighborhoods. And that's not an inappropriate reaction. But I'd like to be able to have a basis for saying, this is the circumstance that we're facing. And that's what's going on with the kind of short-term rental circumstances that are arising in the community across the nation. So I think this is a good first step.
Agreed.
Yeah, excuse me, I agree. And this has been one of those instances where there's been a lot of really good feedback from people on kind of all sides of the issue who are affected in different ways. And those can be difficult to navigate, but I think this is the right step to take at this point.
Yep.
I'm glad we can button at least this piece up.
Should you accept the motion?
Yeah.
Move adoption, approval of the draft, which is 10.8.25 Ordinance Committee draft, Chapter 1020 short-term rental registration before us.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Great. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for your input.
With a quick turnaround, is it your expectations to be on council agenda next week?
Yeah.
Just for those in the public that are interested in this matter of moving out of this committee now goes to council, and it will be on the council's agenda next Wednesday, October 15th.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to item 6, which is review and provide feedback to staff concerning helicopter use. And we have our town planner still here, who is going to introduce her proposal and give us a background.
Thank you. So this one is a little bit new to me. I will profess I know nothing about helicopter landing sites, but I know a little bit more now. So what I gave you all was some information that was gleaned from other communities and around the country Just really some starting points to think about if we wanted to go down this path of considering helicopter landing pads. Let me share my screen and we'll open up this. So I started this much like we normally would do. These are some definitions that you would add to a section, really defining a helistop. This is really the area of land or structure used to or intended to be used for helicopter landings and takeoffs only. So this is very limited. It is just what I would call a helipad, but it's a helistop is the word. And so in reviewing other communities and other places, just again, as a starting point, because this is in no means ready to move forward. This is just for discussion. You would want to consider maybe if you wanted to allow those uses in zoning districts. Our zoning district is so that if a use is not permitted or recognized, it is prohibited. So right now, these uses are not allowed in the town of Scarborough. So it's not permitted, but if you wanted to consider it, what I've proposed is maybe some, again, defining the use, picking out what zoning sections would be appropriate, and then probably looking at it for a special exception process. I don't think you would do a helicopter landing pad by right in any zoning district. The special exception process has its own requirements, but then you could also create some performance standards. So what I've included on this page, these are the standard special exception requirements. It really has to do with compatibility with neighborhood, safety concerns, unhealthy conditions, and so on. And then I've also included some sample performance standards you could put around the specific use. And so one of them has to do with minimum lot size. That really, perhaps we do have some appropriate areas or some areas that maybe it wouldn't be as detrimental to a neighborhood out in the country. So I've just thrown out 25 acres to start. There's some additional application requirements and site plan requirements. And the reason I have this as proposal, there's a lot more work that would need to go into it because this is a use that has federal rules and laws and things that we really need to make sure that we are not doing anything wrong for. And so I really wanted to get some feedback from you all if this is something you wanted staff to continue to pursue, or if you wanted to say we're not ready for this. But again, these are all just kind of talking points that we've found along the way. There are a lot of things to learn. So.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
It might be helpful just for background and context. Autumn's before you, not with a proposal one way or another. She's prepared this material really at my request. Sometime around mid-August, there was an incident in the area of Eastern Road and Serenity Drive. My office received probably 8 or 10 inquiries from neighbors inquiring about this use. And really, very quickly we realized it was not addressed whatsoever in the zoning ordinance. So we just want to make sure we tested the waters with this committee, whether this is something you wished us to spend a little more time with to better understand all the related regulations. And so this is kind of the first step in that direction if you wish to pursue it.
So currently, under our ordinances, no one can land a helicopter in Scarborough.
Correct, unless it was some sort of federal or state emergency that supersedes our rules.
Unless you have questions for Autumn, I will open this up to comment. I don't know, I don't have any specific questions. I have feelings and opinions, but no
Yeah.
questions?
No.
Okay, yep. All right. So with that being said, I will open up to public comment. Again, you have 3 minutes. I please ask that you direct your comments to me. Please state your name and your address.
Hello, Trish Brigham, 10 Serenity Drive. Thank you for your time. And I just would like a little clarification. I was one of the people that approached or commented, sent an inquiry to Tom Hall. And when we did some research, and I'm by no means an expert, we could not find anything that did prohibit. And the person who was involved in this particular incident seemed to indicate that he was at liberty to pursue this. So if we could have, I don't know, if there's something that could be in writing, or if you could direct us to where we might find that it is
Mhm.
prohibited and that perhaps that could be communicated to that particular homeowner or property owner, that would be terrific. And if one person is doing it, given technology, et cetera, I'm thinking with drones and everything else, that this may not be the first incident in the community. And again, I echo, we don't want to regulate everything, but this would severely impact many neighborhoods in Scarborough, particularly sort of more densely populated neighborhoods like we happen to live in, and there are several in Scarborough. So I might urge you, I know you have lots of other things on your plate, but since the issue has been raised, if you have time, I would encourage you to at least see it through. Thank you.
As a general construct in our zoning ordinance, an item is prohibited by omission. I'm not advocating on his behalf, but the homeowner at, I believe, 99 Eastern Road is the one who operates the helicopter. And I think he does have interest in pursuing that further. He's not able to be with us this evening. Perhaps we'll comment and provide comment with you later. So I think there's at least interest on his part in having this conversation.
But I think the
Is
town
there-
manager's comment is well taken. There is a specific provision in the ordinance that says if it's not specifically allowed, or even by special exception, it's not allowed. So it has to be specifically referenced. And so this activity, which is not referenced, is prohibited. And that's why we heard that reference. It is prohibited.
Is there anyone else that wishes to give public comment on this matter?
Good evening. I'm Terry Babine from 1 Summerfield Lane. If it is not allowed due to, it's not listed in there, what is the process to handle a situation if it occurs again? Do we call the police? Do we call town? What's the process for us in moving forward?
Bottom to an hand.
I'm putting you on the spot, Tom.
I would assume that it would happen after hours, so I would contact the dispatch non-emergency number.
Yep, okay.
And then they would go out, investigate, and then they would reach out to the code enforcement officer, the zoning administrator, and we would write a violation notice letter.
Mhm.
And talk to them.
Okay, good to know. The other thing I think why this is so important to continue and to pursue, there are many factors involved in this. Conservation is one. When you clear property and you displace wildlife, there are a lot of things that are going on in that neighborhood. We know of animals that have been displaced, and we're seeing them now in our security cameras, all around our homes and what have you. Piping plovers, I believe, were displaced a while back with some other dumping. They're dumping into land that goes down through to the Nonsuch. And, so we have concerns about a lot of different factors involved, not only also noise. This was something that actually occurred, one of the landings during the day. And so a lot of us work from home in that neighborhood. It's very loud. I think that the folks where that property abuts, there's been some damage already for things that knocked over, fell down, that kind of thing. So it is, a big concern. I think it's also a concern for a lot of us for taxes and what goes on. That kind of situation can have an impact on property valuations, noise, hazardous waste, that kind of thing. So I think that there's a huge, kind of concern about that piece. Our taxes have gone up continuously over the last few years. I don't see that, stopping anytime soon. So again, we want to make sure that, all of our bases are covered off and more work is done. So we would appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Caroline Rodrigue, 7 Heather Lane. I support everybody, what has been said here, but there is a confusion, it seems, with what the town, the regulation with the town and what can happen with that helicopter. So I have a friend who's an air traffic controller and she here in Portland, and she told me, she confirmed to me that if that helicopter requests permission to land, they will allow the helicopter to land. So I understand it's not the same thing, the rules with the city, but if that helicopter has permission of landing, well, they will land, I think. So that's my concern. I think it's a little bit confusing. Thank you.
Good point.
And I think the counterpoint is they will not receive permission to take off. They can't be, if they're not permitted, they can't be there. And if they wish to take off, there'd be no authorization given to allow them to take off.
Is there anyone else that wants to? Yeah. Is there anyone else that wants to give public comment? Do we have anyone? Oh, online? No? Okay. Yes.
Thomas Brigham, currently 10 Serenity Drive, formerly a property owner on Jasper Street for several years before this. I am in an adjacent property to this 99 Eastern Road that has been involved with this helicopter landing. Also secondarily, I own a condominium at Clearview Drive, so I'm a second property owner in the immediate area. So I'll add the objections of 2 properties. Should this committee decide to go forward and consider an ordinance regarding the regulation of helicopters, I would ask that those restrictions be stringent enough that they would not allow this activity in this area that we're discussing. I think the proposal to have a 25-acre minimum is very worthwhile. There are certain areas in town which I think would have plenty of land area and could do this safely and without disturbing other immediate neighborhoods. But in our situation, I think this is inappropriate. And I would hope that that remains in consideration. And I don't know if what we're discussing here is the fact that this is already a prohibited use, whether it is appropriate for the town to provide this property owner with some notice that what he seems to be contemplating and acting to do is in violation of current zoning regulations. And I believe from what I've heard in discussions that the comment from the Portland Jetport and the air traffic controller is my understanding is that may be in compliance with the FAA regulations, but then FAA says it is up to the local town to regulate further. So again, just appreciate everything you're doing and would appreciate your continued support for the protection of our neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to give public comment at this time? Okay. At this time, I will close public comment and open it up to the committee.
I guess the point is the present state of affairs is it's not allowed. So that's sort of our starting point. And planning department would like guidance on where we'd like to go with this. Do we think this is the kind of use that requires allowance at some level? The draft we had before us said 25 acres and some other conditions. Special exceptions are always a good way in which to impose restrictions that protect against adverse impacts. And that's in there. So I think we all agree that it should be prohibited in dense neighborhoods. That's be a crazy thing to do. And special exceptions do allow for protection. And the way the ordinance is drafted, it has a very large tract of land is required. So, I mean, there's some merit to the way in which the planning department has now advanced this for our consideration.
I'm fine with not allowing this. You know, I don't really know what to say. I also, you know, I served on the zoning board for 6 years. If the zoning board is trained correctly, they would not pass this. And so I don't, you know, if I appreciate that this came before us because of someone wanting it, but it's in such a situation that is inappropriate that I don't want to move forward to then open the door that for someone with 25 acres out in, rural suddenly is now bought up by someone else and they've opened up a helipad. And so to me, this is maybe opening the door to changing what Scarborough is. And so hearing that we have an ordinance that specifically already prohibits this, I guess I would like to learn a little bit more about what the violation notice is and what the violation consequence is. Is there a fine? What is the violation, I guess?
We would issue a notice of violation in violation of our zoning ordinance, and there
Okay.
would be a fine. Usually we would not issue a fine at first. We would make contact and say, you can't do this, don't do it again.
Right.
Because this is one of those uses that they haven't built anything or there's no structure or anything like that. So it should be fairly simple conversations.
Okay.
Tom, if you could, if it's appropriate, could you share the nature of the communication with this property owner and helicopter operator? And I think a valid question about whether that person had been informed that that use is not currently allowed.
Yeah, I'm a little hesitant because my communications have been spotty at best, but it's my understanding he has an interest in doing this with some level of frequency, several times a month, I think is what he said to me. I mean, all those details need to be better understood. I think it's for personal use. He also referenced he has a business and he may use it for business purposes, going to clients and further away. And that it would also reside most often at a proper site either in Sanford or Portland. But on occasion, he would come to his home. That's about all I know at this point.
All right, thank you. Yeah, if I can just keep the floor, I guess. I'm generally, I think, in agreement with you, Karen, that I'm certainly, and I think we're all in agreement, we're not interested in allowing this use in any relatively dense areas of town, including the area in question that prompted this. And I know there have been arguments made about relative safety and noise mitigation and things like that, but I think common sense tells us it's a potentially pretty disruptive use. It's also one of those things where, it maybe describe it as kind of low frequency, low instance, low risk, but high consequence. If there ever was an accident, God forbid. So I would say that, I can only imagine potentially supporting it in a 25+ acre context. Even then, I guess I don't see the upside right now in us going out of our way to accommodate that, given everything else that we already have on our plates.
We don't need to make a motion or anything. No. I think you've received our feedback. I don't know.
Is it allowed in other communities that are in proximity to Scarborough?
The only place that we can find is Portland, of course, at the Jetport, and then Ogunquit has an ordinance. York actually has an ordinance specifically prohibiting it because they had someone doing it and they had to send fines. And when I reached out to them, they said the fines just became user fees. So they had to.
And, and that's a very, I appreciate that question because I don't think anyone wants it to turn into that situation. And so.
So with this clarity from you all, I will personally reach out to the person who's requested this and let them know that it is not permitted and the process to consider it is not moving forward.
Correct.
It's done.
Yes. Thank you, Autumn. I'm actually going to ask for like a quick 5-minute break. So we'll let people clear out and then we'll be back. 5 minutes. Great, thank you. All right, we are going to move on to item number 7, which is review and provide feedback to staff regarding the proposed tree care ordinance.
Right. Moving on to item number 3. So the draft that's before you is the draft that Conservation Commission and staff worked on. We started it earlier this year, I'd say, and then Conservation Commission worked through it a few iterations. We did do a town council workshop in September to talk about this a little bit, but this is the actual ordinance that comes at that workshop. We just talked about the high level items and things that would be required. So Tree City is part of your council goals to explore that. And Tree City has 4 parts that you need to achieve it. And the Tree City, for me to suggest it to conservation and is a really proactive way for the town to commit to doing something, because this only would apply to our town-owned rights of ways or public spaces, our parks and whatnot. So it's not an ordinance that would affect individual property owners, except in the case of nuisance or dangerous situations for right-of-way. So this to me is a really positive way to put something in place that says we as the town are committed to beautifying and addressing our trees and diseased trees and things like that. You know, we took down, I think 4 trees down at Dunstan recently, pretty large trees, and that's a pretty big impact when those have been there for 20 or 30 years. And so this would basically, we'd have a plan to put those back, and we would have a set of species that are appropriate in those situations. So the ordinance is set out like all of our other ordinances. There's a purpose, applicability, the administration. We do have a town arborist on staff. We can also take advantage of some of our contractors if we needed to do a little bit more. So this is one of those 4 requirements for Tree City. So Tree City also requires a tree care board or a tree advisory board. It requires $2 per capita of an expenditure, so about $50,000 a year in a line item. We get really close to that already in our public works line item. We would just call it out specifically. And then it requires having an Arbor Day celebration, which would be something that community services would be able to put on. Is Nick still back there? Right. That they would be able to facilitate. And so it's really a couple of departments would be involved. And then I think it would just be a really positive way to move this forward. So the Tree Care Advisory Board, this ordinance has the establishment and procedures. They have to meet 4 times a year. It's a typical board, 5 members plus 2 alternates, council liaison, and that's all laid out. And then they're really responsible for working on those Arbor Day activities, and then education and promoting awareness about trees and the value. They will also submit an annual report to its activities, like tree planting and maintenance activities. So the arborist or the designee would meet with that group at least 4 times a year, and they would review the species and maybe an annual plan of, we're gonna replant, or we're gonna add 150 trees or whatever it might be, but that's what they would work on. And then other duties as assigned by council. So the ordinance sets that up. And then there's also specifics about how we do tree planting. So rather than just whatever we can get at the nursery on sale and putting it in a spot, we actually have some requirements for spacing that's appropriate, the depth, what it has to be planted in. I think we had a good example. We had some applicants, they had to do some planting in some medians recently, and they didn't have the right substrate. So the plants died within, 6 weeks. And so just doing things the proper way, this just lays that out. And then it also ties into our landscape ordinance in the site plan, where we have an extensive tree species list. So this would borrow from that to create that list. And then this part, the public tree maintenance. So this basically says the Public Works Department can prune any public tree. There's some clearance requirements. There is this statement, and so this is the statement I alluded to in the beginning. If an obstructing public tree is on private property, the town arborist and or their designee shall notify the property owner of the intent to prune. So the idea is to get them to work, but if there is a known safety issue, we would have the ability to take care of those things on private property with due notice. So that's included in this. So this is the other section. That's the section for pruning, and then for, so this is what it says. The town arborist shall notify the property owners to prune or remove the tree or plant. If the owner fails to comply with the notice, the town may undertake the necessary work and charge the cost to the property owner. So these two sections are really what I would say would be the only, worrisome or, something a little bit out of the norm that might have an impact on the public, would be these two statements. But the rest of it is all about our property.
Tell me, if you have a tree that's in that situation right now,
Mhm.
how do you deal with it? Do you just let it be?
We have the conversations and Tom?
Well, because I know the utilities come through and they're like, we're cutting your tree because it's on the line and they don't really
Yeah,
give you.
right,
options.
CMP.
So I'm like,
does
you know,
that.
where do you
Yes,
draw
we
the
don't
line?
operate that way.
I mean, we could, but yeah.
Yeah, we can't perform, we can't use public dollars on private property, so we can't go on a private property and remove a tree. Luckily, I think more times than not, we'll find a way to either remove the hazard that's within our right of way, or work with the homeowner and find a way to remove the hazard.
Yep.
But you ask a curious question. I don't know how utility companies work in this, because they certainly don't ask our permission or private property owners' permission. They come in and do what they think needs to be done to preserve the utility line. There's an example just recently across the street at Bessie Commons, or at the old Bessie School. Totally removed the roadside of
Yep.
these 100-year-old trees.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that works in this context. Do
Yeah.
you?
I don't, that'd be something I could.
I was just
figure
curious.
out more about, right.
Because I mean, it is good to at least have something you can
It
rest.
just gives us a little bit more teeth, I think, if you have a problem.
I think it's a very helpful provision. I mean, I see you drive Greenwood Avenue and since people run the stop sign at the end of the street coming up from the beach, all the foliage on the corners is just, it obstructs drivers. Just out they go, and drivers on Greenwood heading towards Harmon's Island, they have to be super careful.
Do you have any questions for Autumn?
My only question is for the language that's specific to private property, is that modeled after anything, any examples of where
Yes.
is already done?
And I don't off the top of my head remember it, but I actually found this in another Maine town and I liked it when I found it. I found it actually trying to research for what we could do about a specific issue and it came up. So I saved it.
Okay, thanks.
We don't have any more questions for Autumn. I'm going to open this up for public comment. I don't know if there's anyone in the public that wants to on our tree ordinance. Yes. If you're here, you have to speak.
Rebecca Hatt, Maple Ave. More of a question. I was looking at some of the right-of-way language, and I think there's a right-of-way that goes from Maple back into another neighborhood that sometimes gets a bit overgrown. And I think the town currently comes through and kind of pushes back some of the brush and things. Would the language, how does public right-of-way get treated in terms of cost? Does it become the cost of the town, or does it become the cost of the host property? That's my question.
Yeah.
We typically assume any cost within the right of way.
There you go.
The right of way is the town's property, so yeah.
Okay. Any other public comment? I will close public comment. Always excited to move forward a goal. But please take me back to my original want and request of disallowing clear cutting in Scarborough. So I think what originally happened in my recollection was that our sustainability manager came to us and said, hey, South Portland has created an ordinance that does not allow clear cutting townwide. And so I was like, this is amazing, because one of the biggest feedbacks that I've received over the last couple of years is the clear cutting. And so I wanted to move forward an ordinance that was going to be in response to the feedback of no clear cutting. So while I want to be a tree city and everything, and I don't want to cloud this, can this ordinance would not be able to address the clear cutting?
No, not the way this is. And we actually drafted an ordinance for Conservation Commission to look at that, what that would look like.
Yeah.
And I think even that group, so it came about the property on Holmes Road that clear cut, I don't know how many acres of
Right. And
forested
I think people look at the Eight
land.
Corners development too.
And Eight Corners is a little bit different because they did have an approved site plan. They went through the process. And so they only developed 9 acres rather than 57. So what they did, I like the Holmes Road example better because they didn't have any plans or anything. They got a forestry permit and they cleared it.
Right.
And we got a lot of calls about that. So an ordinance that would address that, there's a lot of ways to do it. And I tend to agree with having a no clear cutting ordinance from a planning perspective, but we have to be prepared to enforce it and almost have like that. We have so many trees. We had tree ordinances in Texas in similar situations, but we didn't have nearly the tree stands that we have or the property area that we have with that. So when we talked about conservation, it came up, people were concerned about, so are we requiring a permit for the removal of every tree, or is it just this size tree? How do you know what it is? And so there was a lot of questioning, and then I suggested, let's start at this proactive way. Let's find our tree people. Let's find out if there is a way to get more, information and more resident desire. Because I think I will say, I think it's one thing to say, oh, they shouldn't have cut down all those trees. But in that same token, that same person might not want me to tell them they can't cut down their tree either. And so it's like a fine line. It's South Portland. I think it took 2 or 3 years to get to that ordinance, and they don't have the land that we have and the tree stands.
Well, probably because they should have done it earlier, right? And I feel like that we're going to be South Portland if we don't. And so, I mean, for me, I'm going to continue to say, I want to respond to residents. I think we should have an ordinance that disallows clear cutting throughout the town. I just want to say to the residents out there, I'm trying, I hear you. I don't want it to be allowed, but I have to convince 6 people every time that we shouldn't do it. I do think there's a lot of hesitancy coming in within committees to also do something so bold. And so, I appreciate Jamie bringing that to us. I'm disappointed that we've kind of retracted to this point where I think in Scarborough, we needed to start making bold steps to deal with, I think, some of the issues that we're having. I'm very happy to move this forward. I just do not want to continue. I want to continue the conversation about how to deal with the clear cutting. That would have been my preference.
You could also, since we've talked about it in the department about maybe approaching it where you require some sort of clear cutting is really, it's hard. Maybe there's requirement for some sort of leaving a buffer around your property. Because if in the state, if you can get a forestry permit, you can clear cut.
Right.
And that's the tricky part about if you're just a residential property owner and you don't like leaves, I have probably 150 oak trees and my husband hates this time of year because it's all about the leaves. And so maybe I'm somebody that moved from away and I just want to cut down all the trees. We would just need such a process to get that information out that people have to contact us and figure out what that means for homeowners.
Right. I think at a minimum, having a buffer would have been great for the 8 corner situation, because
but see, and I don't want to get too in the weeds,
Right.
and we'll talk about that as actually a case study for next week's workshop.
Lovely.
But the ordinance, the zoning itself put that development the way that it is to save the trees in the back.
Right.
So
They can go swimming on Now I appreciate all of your hard work with this and I don't want to undermine it or devalue it by my comments, because I mean, it's really exciting to me that, you know, I mean, we are the Pine Tree State and I do think we should be doing a good job to protect it. If someone's moving here and they don't like leaves, maybe they shouldn't move here. If they want to clear.
I agree.
Then maybe you're not in the right state, you know? So I mean, that's just kind of my feedback. Corey or Bill?
Sure. I guess starting on the clear cutting topic, I definitely understand the impulse and share it to a degree. I just do think it is important to keep in mind that there's also, we see this manifest itself in various ways in front of this committee and the full council. There's a very strong tradition and culture in Maine of private property rights and forestry. I mean, one of the reasons we're called the Pine Tree State is because of our, there's been a very robust logging industry that was critical to the state's economy. I'm not pretending that that is integral to our economy here in Scarborough, but it is something that some people value. And I would certainly support continuing to explore it, some version of it, but I think we would really want to make the effort to have full outreach and full transparency with landowners about what it is that we're talking about. The buffering consideration is important. I mean, even up in the so-called Allagash Wilderness, where I've spent a lot of time, that's really just a ribbon of untouched land that has active logging on either side. But the whole concept is you theoretically can't see that when you're on the river, so it kind of creates this illusion that you're in this pristine virgin wilderness. And so, yeah, I think the point there is that can, in terms of perception, that can have a big effect. And I look forward to, discussing and hearing the case study on the Eight Corners project. I do, it gets brought up a lot within the context of growth and development and open space. I think a lot of it, again, without going into the weeds myself, really boils down to kind of subjective reactions to certain development patterns and whether you're shocked by seeing a building that's right up against the street or not, and that scale. A lot of that really ultimately does come back to zoning, as Autumn said. So I think that's also a discussion we can continue to have. And as far as this language that's in front of us, I support it. I'm somewhat ambivalent about some of the private property stuff. And I think we can expect that if this does move forward, and people start to tune into it a little bit more, we may hear some opinions about it. I know it was brought up within the context of a couple of meetings down in Pine Point about the plans for East Grand, and there were concerns down there, folks who live along East Grand and then in Pine Point itself around sight lines, people getting in and out of driveways and things like that. And I think some of those folks would say, well, we need to do more to, with the roads and the parking regulations. So there are just a lot of moving pieces there. So that said, I'm fine with advancing it for further consideration by staff and the full council.
Yeah, when I read it, I said, this ordinance draft had me at hello, to paraphrase a line. It seems like a very appropriate thing for a community like Scarborough to do. Yes, I think there's some work to be done, but I really supported the concept that this represents.
Do other Tree Cities, is this basically typical of what the Tree City ordinance is, or is this, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, and so do they typically apply it to town properties, or is it kind of just different?
Well, the tree care ordinance, the whole idea is it's only town
Okay,
properties.
okay, perfect, thank you.
I also assume that Karen will be organizing the required annual Arbor Day celebration.
Sure,
Thanks.
with my chainsaw. If we don't have any other questions, I'll take a motion.
And we're moving this. I didn't look at the time.
I'd like to get our goal in under the wire here.
Town council. Okay, so, move, approval moving forward of the Town of Scarborough tree care ordinance.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you.
Yeah. You'd like to see that on your agenda next week, I presume?
Yeah, if we could get a council goal
Goal.
moving along, yeah,
Sure.
that would be awesome.
We'll do our best. Yep.
Be great. Thank you, Autumn. Thank you. Okay. On to item number 8, which is consider and propose the proposed ordinance changes required for compliance with LD 427. And we will just let Autumn tell us all about that.
Okay. So LD 427 is a new state law that went into effect on September. I do think I've reached out to all of our neighbors. We're ahead. Feel good about that. There's lots of ordinance amendments that we will need to consider before next July for 1829, but this one is a fairly easy one. This one limits the minimum parking space requirements that a town can require to 1 per residential unit. And it is within a designated growth area. So let me show you, this is what we have right now. We require 2 spaces for each single family dwelling unit, 2 spaces for each 2-family, and then 1.5 for 2 or more bedrooms. So the red line is what we would have to change. There are 2 options, and that's the confusing part that I want a little bit of input. Option 1 is the option that I call the easy option for staff. It just says, we're just gonna amend our table, our parking table, just to comply because it's easier. The single family, 1 space for each dwelling unit, it doesn't give me a great amount of pause because most of our zoning districts, the lot size and the things are probably gonna take care of that. The multifamily would be the one that gives me a little bit more pause, but it doesn't matter. I can't do anything about that in option 2 because all of our multifamily is allowed in our growth areas. So this is option 2, and this would be to differentiate between growth areas versus non-growth areas. And the non-growth area is basically our RRF zoning district. And so that's why I was saying, like, those lot areas are so big, it's almost not that big of a deal. If you say 1, you're gonna provide 2 because you're doing an 80,000 square foot lot. You're gonna have plenty of room to park.
Right.
So that was really my point with option 1. But this is another way you could totally do it. It would require a little bit more thinking on staff's part when they do subdivision to site plan approvals, just to identify if they're in the growth area or non-growth area. So option 2 and option 1, it's really the feedback. Other than that, the law is the law and we sort of have to comply.
Right.
So in order to make this work, we would change section 11, that's our off-street parking, in 1 or other of those 2 options. And then section 5, the Board of Appeals, they have a process for off-street parking lots, and the planning board also grants parking for off-street parking lots. So I want to remove the Board of Appeals because it doesn't necessarily talk about when it's different. It makes more sense to do it with planning board in the context of the site plan process. So that was one of the changes as well. And then there's also one other thing that we would have to do in section 11 is to create a definition for parking agreement. And then we have to change the off-street parking location. We currently have an off-street parking location that allows you to do it if it's located within 300 feet, but this new law requires us to go up to 1/4 of an acre. So.
1/4 of a mile.
Or sorry, 1/4 of a mile, yes. Share that. So in a nutshell, the only thing that we can really have any choice is the option 1 or option 2.
And so everything else, we just have to accept.
Yeah, and Phil Saucier's reviewed it and helped me out to make sure we're meeting the intent for the off-street parking location.
And just for our clarity and for the benefit of anyone who might be watching, this is sort of this is companion legislation to the infamous LD 1829. 1829 has a longer implementation timeline, right? So that's why this is coming
Right.
first.
This one, they have a requirement for rulemaking to take place, but they didn't put in an additional date requirement, so it has to comply in September. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
So, and if anything changes through the rulemaking process, which I haven't heard even when that's gonna begin, I'll come back with another amendment.
Do you have a recommendation as to option 1 or option 2?
I like option 1, it's easier.
Easy is good.
It's simpler, it's a little less complicated for.
Do we have any, let me do public comment. Do we have anyone who wants to do public comment?
Rebecca Hat, Maple Ave. I was kind of just curious, and it strikes me that it looks like I just pulled up LD 427, and it does look like it uses slightly different language. I think LD 1829 applied to growth areas and lots that are on sewer, public sewer and septic, if I'm not mistaken. So doing option 2 would maybe create kind of an odd bifurcation where you could be allowed a certain density by LD 1829, but then have different parking requirements
Mhm.
than you would kind of expect,
Yeah.
which may be a pro or a con, depending on how you see it. But that could be confusing, I would think.
Thank you. Have you applied to a committee yet?
I have.
Hey.
What's your name?
We're recruiting her.
That brought us down into the weeds.
I will close public comment if we have no other public comment. I guess option 1 makes sense, because for me, in the non-growth areas, again, it's not gonna be an issue. I mean, it's
Right.
gonna be a larger lot, and so, I mean, it's the growth areas that we wanna make sure there is enough parking, but we can't. This is what we're forced to do.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna go with option 1.
Okay.
I'll take your feedback, everyone.
Nodding.
Yeah.
Yes.
Were you looking for more feedback than that?
That's all.
Okay.
Just needed to move and see if you all were comfortable moving that forward.
If we have to, yes. I don't want to, but we have to. Do we need to do yes, so I'll take a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Nope.
Motion to
Approve.
approve.
Option 1.
Option 1. Thank you.
Was that a motion?
Was that your motion, Bill?
Yes.
Okay. Second.
Okay, all in favor? Thank you.
Just, I noted the timeline you had did not have this going to council next week. But I saw November 5th.
I was trying to buy myself a little bit
Okay.
of reprieve.
Yeah, I
Okay,
mean,
are you
Good
okay?
call.
You don't have
That's
this?
great.
Okay,
That's a good call.
okay, good, thank you.
we really just want that tree care order.
I would trade that for.
Yeah. Okay, we have one more item. Item 9 is to consider proposed amendments to chapter 612, rules and regulations for the use of parks and recreational facilities. And this evening, we have our Director of Community Services and our Police Chief to educate us and inform us on this. Good evening.
Thanks for having us tonight. Chief and I are here to just talk to the committee a little bit about some minor changes or further exploration around chapter 612. So over the past few years, the town's received various feedbacks in terms of feedback and inquiries and concerns around the sections kind of we'll discuss tonight. As we look to pull it up here, Liam's going to kind of scroll through. We'll move down to section 3 to start. Very tiny. This was a minor change or minor request to change. It's really the addition of model rockets. We've had a lot of inquiries even within the last 6 months to set these off in public parks and beaches. And we just want the ability to be able to review and approve and work with the fire department to make sure they're safe to do so, and then be able to choose the location to have them set up. Many of the inquiries are around the beaches, and we just want to make sure it's completely safe for us to do so.
That's good.
And then we'll scroll down to section 9. And this is the largest portion that saw some requested changes around language. And this really is, the section is in our current ordinance is entitled all terrain vehicles. It's very vague. It's a 2-line sentence. So we would like to change it to use of motorized and other vehicles in our public parks, facilities, and beaches. And the language here, so the one area that I think may need some further exploration is really around e-bicycles. As technology expands here, these e-bicycles are going faster and faster. You really need an education in e-bikes in general, because class 1, class 2, class 3, there's various speeds, the heaviness of certain bikes. So a lot of people have reached out in terms of concerns specifically around the beach areas and some public areas as well. So one thing that we talked about in here was just kind of adding electric bicycles into our motorized vehicle piece. We could also explore to remove the electric bicycles from this and make subcategories that kind of pertain to class 1 and 2 specifically. As you see at Eastern Trail, class 1 and 2 is allowed on the Eastern Trail, and then that's managed by ETMD. But class 3 is not, and you'll see that in other towns and municipalities as well. If you do research on beaches, a lot of the beaches don't allow class 1, 2, or 3. And that would be my recommendation moving forward, to not allow operation use of electric bicycles on our town beaches if we were to move forward with that. The other language just kind of ties everything together. And we also leaned heavily on the Maine state laws in regards to the e-bikes. And in addition, we had no language around mobilized wheelchairs. So we wanted to support language in our local ordinance with that.
So the language you see here, I think we'd like to work a bit further to maybe differentiate between beaches and other park facilities, and then further clarity around class 1, 2, or 3. We've had some time to think, even since this was published. So that's a piece that we'd ask for your indulgence to allow us to do a little more work, come back to you at your next meeting with some final language in that regard.
We don't want to completely restrict everyone in town from having access to utilize the electric bicycles, but we want to make sure it's in a safe area, not our heavily congested populated areas.
How do our neighbors do it? You know, what does Old Orchard do? Do they allow e-bike Saco?
I'm a little nervous to adopt their own ordinance around it, but a lot of what you see here is drafted in and comes from South Portland. It comes from Wells, Biddeford, Gorham, Wyndham. So I really looked at the surrounding towns to kind of combine some of the language. And some separate even additionals into bicycles and how bicycles are, where they can be allowed with right of ways. It's very detailed.
Yep.
But I think just our ability to differentiate and have a few subsets here will allow us to educate the public a little bit more. And then as we go down, I think Chief is going to talk to C here.
Yes, this was added in this ordinance as a consideration due to an incident that we had back in August on Pine Point Beach, when a fixed wing aircraft landed at about 6:30 in the morning on Pine Point Beach. And the officer who responded really had his hands tied, because we had nothing in ordinance prohibiting this. We had nothing in state law prohibiting, and the pilot had complied with all FAA guidelines as far as landing on a beach. He had a ground guide. He apparently landed beyond the 500-foot threshold of another person walking on the beach. But in my mind, it just didn't feel like it was anything that was close to being safe for our folks that frequent the beach and those who live there. So that's why it's coming forward to you tonight for any fixed wing or any rotary style aircraft to be prohibited from landing on any of our beaches or in our parks unless it's a absolute emergency.
The one thing the pilot didn't do, he didn't park far enough away from a plover nest. So just like Al Capone got tax evasion, he got fined for being too close to a plover nest. So.
That's what we do in Scarborough here. No, I appreciate the addition of that.
And then furthermore, throughout the document, the rest of it's just formatting changes, updating our parks and our facility spaces because some of our facilities.
I should mention former Councilor Ken Johnson, some of you may know. Ken, I think, is the self-appointed mayor of the park. He's frequents it multiple times a day, and many of these points he's raised to me, given his frequency of the park, and we're pleased to get that level of input. So we kind of buried the lead. The fixed wing aircraft is really what brought this.
Right.
And while we're doing, we said we might as well bring in some of these, some of these things didn't exist 5 years ago, frankly.
The only other one we didn't address was drones. That's a common, something that's commonly brought up. In research with other towns, everyone leans on the FAA and really hasn't drafted their own local ordinance rules and regs around the drone usage.
And many towns have a separate drone ordinance that pertains as much to private property to make sure that, drones aren't operating on private property and taking pictures or video. So if that's an area, I think we could probably address that separately and singly as opposed to wrapping it into here.
Is this the ordinance that regulates fireworks throughout the town? It doesn't. Is that a different ordinance?
Different
Different.
consumer fireworks ordinance.
Our own section is section 3.
You can't like prohibit fireworks today under this ordinance. Does anyone have any questions for them before I open up the public comment? Yeah.
So I don't know if who this is best to direct it to, but on page 3 and section 13 around permit applications, there's a reference to group function. And I just was curious as to whether that's defined anywhere. It's not, it doesn't appear to be defined, at least in this document. So, is there a cutoff beyond which it's, in terms of number of people, beyond which it's considered a group gathering, or is
one
this?
of our other ordinances in terms of mass in gatherings and mass gatherings? I don't have it on the top of my head, but I'm pretty confident.
Is it the word group, like do you want us to just say for a function? Do you think there can be issue like with
I
what?
guess-
I'm not a group?
Well, yeah, I guess I'm just thinking about it. I'm just imagining scenarios like someone has a little birthday party or something, or are we talking about that? Or are we talking about having a protest or something else, or an athletic event?
It's more around gatherings,
Yeah,
probably.
it could be family reunions, could be like birthday parties,
What
could
about
be
a protest?
weddings.
Okay.
Yeah, potentially. I think that level of flexibility, you're right, it's not defined, but I think
So-
if it's simply left as an event, I think that, I think we're just trying to be inclusive here.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. And I don't mean to put too fine a point on it, but I guess so, like, as an example, think about Memorial Park, it's sort of, there's a tradition of all of the kids show up there with their parents on prom night and they all take pictures all around there. Is that, that always feels pretty organic to me, but would that be something that would theoretically require?
We would not look to rule over anything like that, because there's common gatherings down there.
Right.
On a daily basis.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be a function that would, be for the period of time for kind of private use of that event or that group, at the expense of the public, if you will.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Did I do public comment?
No.
I will open this up for public comment. Is there anyone that would like to comment on this? We lost our commenter. All right, if there's no,
Come on, Andy.
All right, if there's no one that wants any public comment, I will close public comment and open this up to the committee. My understanding is you guys want more time to work on the number 9.
Really around
Yeah, are you looking for feedback? Cause like, I can say I don't want e-bikes on the beach. I mean, I've had it zoom by me before and I just, it's inappropriate. I feel like, I mean, you've got
Right.
kids, plovers, dogs, and then
Right.
you got electric bikes going through. I mean, and so,
That's helpful.
yeah, no, I mean, for me, it's a safety issue because I don't typically see people with bikes on the beach. I mean, I don't go there that often, sadly, but I don't know what you think.
I agree with you.
But
I think another area is Memorial Park in general, just with some of the feedback has been about around the confinement of that. And when there's a lot of people down there, the speeds that they can come down the hills, do we restrict Memorial Park more than we would another park or Peterson Field?
right, can you restrict like your parks, but not your trails or something? I don't know. I don't think they should be in parks. I mean, parks are gathering places for families, pets. I just, you can zoom by on the road. You shouldn't be having to zoom on like the park trail and stuff like that. I mean, that's just my kind of feedback with that. Anything else, gentlemen?
No.
No? Okay, so for next steps, we'll see you again soon, I guess? Okay, yes, Tom?
Yes, that'd be
That's
great.
it?
Thanks. We have what we need.
Okay. 6:44.
Yeah.
Item 7 is future meeting and agenda items. We don't know if we're meeting in November since typically committees don't meet, but I don't. Okay. Is that's the one that Angela was talking about?
Yeah, that's not terribly time sensitive. That really has to do with, started with a request from the Pine Point community regarding limiting the size of vehicles that gets parked in the on-street spaces, and that really is a seasonal issue.
Yeah.
But 601 is so expansive and it needs so much work. I know Angela has some other things that she said, aha, let's bring that forward. So I wouldn't suggest you need to meet in November
Yeah.
because of that.
I think what we could do is just say like, let's try to make it a priority for the new ordinance committee come December or January.
Yes.
I mean, let's say like this needs to go on their agenda.
So chapter 612, what we just talked about, and 601
Right.
will be a good, easy lift to start with for them.
Mhm.
You should have given them short-term rental, just to start off, just.
Hey, likewise, if there is an appetite for thinking about drones, that might be another thing to put on the radar, so to speak.
Talk about it, right?
Yeah, since it was brought up and it is another example of, changing technology that,
Mhm.
where was not necessarily contemplated by existing language.
Yeah, it'd be nice to know what other towns in the area are doing.
Yeah, I think that would probably be a good
Just-
start.
Yeah,
Because I think they said some towns are hesitant to touch it.
Yeah.
Which I can appreciate, but we can see what they're doing.
but yeah.
You want to keep November's?
Nope.
No.
Yeah, no, we'll cancel it.
Good call.
One less meeting. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
The move.
Second?
All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you. You moved through your work tonight. Thank
Yeah.
you.